Breaking news. Elon and Team Doge are calling for an audit of the Federal Reserve. And what do you know? In a press conference this morning, Jerome Powell just announced that he would end the unlawful debanking that held back Bitcoin in the last cycle. Can you imagine what would happen if markets were actually free? It's like when the NFL ended their End Racism campaign. And now we got white cornerbacks like Cooper DeJean looking like Deion Sanders in the Super Bowl.
16, Mahomes rolling out, looking, firing, intercepted, picked up by Cooper DeJean, gets a block, DeJean is...
Removing the hurdles caused by the Fed and the government will allow Bitcoin to reach new levels of price discovery. 2025 is going to be a good year for Bitcoin.
Anthony, what do you make of just the way Bitcoin has moved? We're at $97,000 right now. Call it 97,500. It has moved down. Obviously, was on a huge run. But when you think about the floor, we've heard people say the floor might be 70. I don't know if you think that's accurate. And then obviously, people talk about the sky being the limit when it comes to the ceiling.
Well, listen, Andrew, I began my Bitcoin journey about 5 years ago, and I've been tarred and feathered and praised as it goes up and down, and you oscillate between genius and dummy. But I think that Bitcoin now is representing where prices should have been in 2022. And said differently, if you look at the November Bitcoin futures approval, just studying administrative law, the spot ETF should have been approved sometime in the first quarter of 2022. So all of that delay caused a lot of that price damage. And so I see it here as the community seeing itself getting propitious, decent, middle-of-the-road regulation. And if you look at the people that the Trump administration has put into those positions, I think you end up getting that. And so 97,000, 98,000 is sort of where I thought we would be 3 years ago. So the real question is, will the institutions enter the game? And I think you see some of the endowments starting to do that. We know some of the sovereign wealth funds in the Middle East are quietly doing that. And so I think it's going to be a very good year for Bitcoin.
And it's not just about the barriers that are being removed. Don't forget about the money printer going brrr. Interest on U.S. debt hit $1.2 trillion over the last year and is expected to hit $1.5 trillion if rates remain unchanged, which Powell just said this morning he's in no rush to change. So that means that the government is between a rock and a hard place, and gold is smelling it out. Gold is telling us that something big is about to happen, as gold buying has increased 115% over the last 2 months. People are buying more gold than COVID. So don't be fooled by Bitcoin's sideways price action. Something's brewing under the surface, and this is the moment, right before Bitcoin explodes. In today's episode, I'll give you a couple reasons to back this thesis up. This is Dante Cook with Bitcoin Simply. Let's go. With Doge bringing scrutiny and transparency to all corners of the government, even the Fed is now coming into the spotlight. The former president of the World Bank is now even highlighting the schemes of the Fed. And it seems like the Fed, along with the U.S. Treasury, have been manipulating markets. Full stop.
Yeah, it's worrisome. The Fed basically has become now just a giant hedge fund. It's lost $1 trillion, and counting. It's going to be a gigantic loss. What it does is borrows money at 5.4% from banks and then dumps it into government bonds. So think what that trade does. That causes the government to think that it's better off than it is. And so that encouraged the government to be short when rates were zero. So why did the government borrow so much in T-bills? Well, because the Fed was buying the bonds and it made it look like yields were going to stay low for remember the low for long phrase. So we've got these multiple problems that are going on, and it endangers the dollar. So that's the basic case.
Instead of the Fed having such large balances, wouldn't the private sector be starting businesses and risking capital and bringing returns and adding to growth? Wouldn't all that money be better if it wasn't with the Fed?
That's right. And we're depending on private equity. So as the banks get squeezed out, because they're lending so much to the Fed,
not lending it to other people.
It's literally a floating rate loan from banks to the Federal Reserve so it can buy government bonds. So if that were freed up, that would allow the banks to at least consider a small business loan, an inventory loan, the kinds of things that help the economy grow. And this is on a global basis. It's not just the Fed. It's all the major central banks doing the same thing, meaning taking money from the economy in order to buy government bonds. We need to be clear on that. I heard the previous segment, they talk about money printing. There isn't any money printing on it. It's just money borrowing, and they pay top dollar for it. The Fed pays 5.4 to banks and 5.3 to money market funds, so to the Fidelity and Vanguard and so on.
In order for the economy to grow, the debt must continue to grow. And the first 4 months of this fiscal year produced an $838 billion deficit. That's over $300 billion more recorded in the same period last fiscal year. We're on pace to run a $2.5 trillion annual deficit. Unless there's major fiscal reform, this chart is showing us that the printer must turn on. With all of these entitlements, you risk pitchforks. People that were promised something like Medicare or Social Security are now going to be without it. Or you have to keep both promises and print more money. Scott Bessent highlights the problem that's been happening with government all along.
I am very concerned about what is happening right now. We have never had a budget deficit like this. We are at 7% of GDP in terms of the deficit. We've never had this when it's not a recession, not a war. And what do we have to show for it? We have they have created 18,000 manufacturing jobs. Last year, the economy only created 250,000 private sector jobs. This is a takeover of the government, of the private sector.
This is what's driving Trump's decisions and his policy. His endgame is to cut the deficit, stimulate the economy, and lower the cost of money. I believe that unless we lower rates, a bank failure like SVB is just going to be the beginning. Banks aren't borrowing now more than they have at any other point in history, more than the great financial crisis, and way more than COVID. Jeff Park, head of strategy at Bitwise, lays out the thesis here.
Of all of this, everything we've been talking about so far, how does this impact Bitcoin?
Yeah, so many people today are concerned about the path dependencies and the second and third order effects of what these tariffs are going to do and how China is going to respond and yada, yada, yada. We don't know. None of us can know. But actually, what's really easy is solving it backwards by knowing what the end game is. And the end game, as I've described and as you've outlined here, is that Trump wants one thing to protect his own bags, which is lower 10-year rates. And that is nakedly obvious in front of anyone who can understand what he's doing. And so actually, if you know that's the end game, it's a little bit easier to solve backwards as to kind of putting things in motion to get to that end conclusion. So if you take for granted that then the 10-year is going to compress, two things are going to happen. One, risk capital in the US will be on fire again, because there's now a wall of cash coming back into the market with yield lower that's going to be chasing risk. It's going to be great for the stock market. It's going to be great for Bitcoin. And if you actually thought tariffs were permanent, you will know there's going to be a large income tax cut associated with that. Unfortunately, income tax as a tool is regressive in nature, right? Where the removal of it actually then creates more abundance of wealth at the top, which is more capital then that is going to seek risk. So there's actually a profound effect on risk capital if you thought an income tax would be repealed. So that is incredibly good for Bitcoin. But the other side of it is if you're not an American and you're on the other side of that equation where you are suffering on the back of these tariffs, you're basically sitting at home looking at TV and realizing your elected leaders completely failed you. And now they're basically on a race to the bottom to debase their own currency against a weakening dollar to basically try to sustain their export economy. So they're going to print like as if there's no end. And what you're going to witness is an acceleration of that depreciation of your non-dollar asset that you as a foreigner are denominated by. If you're that person, ask yourself, what am I going to purchase to protect my wealth in a way that I seem to have no option as a citizen of any of these countries? The beautiful thing about Bitcoin, and this is the ultimate ethos of what it represents, is that it can be bought anywhere, anytime, without any friction in the ways that it gives the sovereignty back to the person, the individual. And so they're going to buy Bitcoin too. So you got this incredible demand where both sides of the market, for a very different reason, one's for speculation, one's for insurance, but they all come to the same conclusion. You have to buy Bitcoin. And that's why I think this is as easy and clear as it can be for why it's so optimistic.
As money floods into the system, Bitcoin is poised to lead the charge. If you like this show and this content, please like and subscribe to this video. And if you're considering taking the next step in your Bitcoin journey, consider working with one of our show sponsors. Our first sponsor being Ledin. the leader in Bitcoin-backed loans. Since 2018, they've lent out over $6.5 billion worth of loans to tens of thousands of customers who want to unlock liquidity in their Bitcoin without selling it. They're the first digital lender to do a proof of reserves, and they have never lost a single sat of their customers' Bitcoin or money. Filling out an application takes less than 2 minutes, and you can have liquidity in your bank account in less than 24 hours. I've done it myself, and it's a great process. Go to ledn.ao/borrowing to unlock liquidity in your Bitcoin without selling it today. That's ledn.ao/borrowing. And if you want to remove power from the government, well, stop funding the system. One of the ways that you can stop funding the system is by taking self-custody of your Bitcoin. And if you don't know how to do that, I suggest that you get a coach from the Bitcoin way. Members of their team will walk you through proper 100% self-custody and help you remove your keys from the exchanges. Because as they say, not your keys, not your coin. Schedule a 30-minute consultation with their team today at thebitcoinway.com/simplybitcoin. That's thebitcoinway.com/simplybitcoin. Protect your generational wealth the right way. Check this out. Polish Central Bank President Adam Kapliński just said that under no circumstances will they have Bitcoin as part of their strategic reserve. He said there's a lot to be said about Bitcoin. You can buy a lot and gain a lot as well as lose a lot. However, we prefer something certain. You know what things are certain? Fiat currencies continuing to lose value over time.
A 1998 dollar today is only worth 51 cents. A 2014 dollar today is only worth 74 cents. A 2019 dollar is only worth 80 cents. That was caused by this massive deficit spending, the devaluation of the dollar, and a lot of devaluations occurred over the last 4 years because we spent too much money. Not because we didn't tax America enough, it's because we spent way too much money.
This is certain. You know what else is certain as a central banker? You're going to need to manipulate and expand your policies to intervene when your currency has a crisis against the dollar, just like India's central bank had to do yesterday. This is certain. You're likely under the fallacy that Bitcoin is still a tulip, but name one other tulip that has had over a $2 trillion market cap that has gone to zero. I'll wait, because there isn't one.
I think that it's probably better to just observe a few things. Mm-hmm. One is Bitcoin has now been around for 15 years, mm-hmm. and there has not been a Bitcoin 2.0. Mm-hmm. So there's no crypto 2.0. This is Bitcoin is the surviving chain. Mm-hmm. And Bitcoin has become a $2 trillion asset, which never in history, financial history, has anything reached $2 trillion and then disappeared. Mm-hmm. So it's a different argument if it was $100 billion.
Okay.
The third is the U.S. government is reiterated its commitment to make Bitcoin a strategic reserve asset. Mm-hmm. That's not bad for the price of Bitcoin. So if someone is watching this and said, well, they don't understand Bitcoin, so they decide not to own it, mm-hmm. it's a catastrophic.
The obvious winner in this whole dollar and fiat currency collapse is Bitcoin.
It increasingly looks like Bitcoin is sort of like the, at least if not the neutral reserve asset choice of the West. Like I retweeted it on Friday or Saturday. Like Besant is meeting with Loomis. Like that's fascinating to me. That's absolutely fascinating to me. And she's saying like, we're talking about a Bitcoin reserve. Like I would not have bet that tweet would have taken place even a week before. So things seem to be moving really fast. To your point about, Russian language media came out this week, or 2 weeks ago, excuse me. State Duma introduced a Bitcoin reserve, all in Russian. You gotta, I didn't see it anywhere on Bloomberg. I didn't see it anywhere on Reuters. I didn't see it anywhere on CNBC. I had to translate the friggin' article from Russian in Google Translate, but there it is. And so, think about the implications of the world's biggest commodity producer bidding for Bitcoin. Are you kidding me? The implications. Sell oil by Bitcoin.
So there's that it's not even covered. Not even covered.
And that's why I say that the big structural impact ultimately is, tactically, inflation, dollar up, disruption, whatever. Okay, interesting. But to me, that's not the real, that's the warm up. To me, the main event is 100% tariffs to force people from exiting the dollar system will nearly instantaneously drive the ending of the post-$71 system, because the world is not going to sit and, oh, we're going to starve because of these tariffs. No, they're going to go, hey, Russia, I see you're selling in Bitcoin. Great. Or gold, whatever they got to do. They're going to move to gold and Bitcoin, some mixed way, shape, or form. And the reality is like gold and Bitcoin aren't priced in the correct zip code.
Yeah.
If this is even directionally accurate.
Yeah.
Like Bitcoin would need at least one, a different digit in front of it. At least. And probably, and gold probably needs one too.
The dollar will maintain its global status, and Bitcoin will be the global currency backing all fiat currencies. You either get on board or you get left behind.
And there's every indication that nation states are embracing it. Jerome Powell says it's a digital asset. Christine Lagarde says it's a digital asset. The head of the SEC taught a class on it. I think that people understand it's not a threat to the dollar, by the way. What's going to happen is the U.S. dollar is going to be the world reserve currency, and it's going to run on billions and billions of mobile devices. And the digital asset that underlies that currency is going to be Bitcoin.
Wow. I will tell you, my friends got me addicted. I'm a student. I'm learning. I'm still on the first chapter of sort of like cryptocurrency for dummies. But I can't read enough of it. I love reading your stuff, and we appreciate you sharing it with us. Thank you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
You either become a champion and get on board and win, like Saquon Barkley, who took almost $10 million worth of his sponsorship dollars in Bitcoin. And that turned out to be a pretty good decision for him. Or you can be a chief and wake up every morning and get hit in the face with rising prices, a devalued dollar, and inflation all over the world. Everything falls against Bitcoin, even the S&P 500. Hopefully you'll recognize this before it's too late. And you know what you're not too late for? Getting your ticket to the BitBlockBoom conference in Dallas, Texas, happening from April 3rd through April 6th. It will be the Bitcoin event of the year. You'll get a chance to hear from some of your favorite speakers in Bitcoin, like Parker Lewis, Guy Swan, Marty Bent, Bob Burnett, and me. Get $100 off your all-inclusive ticket that will give you access to workshops like how to buy your first Bitcoin, how to mine at home, and even things like a Saturday casino night where you're going to get to interact with your favorite Bitcoiners that you will look at on podcasts in real life. Get $100 off your all-inclusive ticket by going to bitblockboom.com and entering the promo code BBB25. That's bitblockboom.com and using the promo code BBB25. This is Dante Cook with Bitcoin Simply. Happy stacking.